Welcome, everyone, to the Girlfriend Book Club's monthly discussion. I'm Shelley Emling, the editor of the Girlfriend newsletter. I'm also the moderator of the Girlfriend Book Club. So tonight, we are so thrilled to be joined by Amanda Peters, the author of The Berry Pickers, which is what the 72,000 or so members of the Girlfriend Book Club chose as our book pick for this month, and I'm thrilled. I read it in about a week. I know a lot of you read it in about 2 days. It was that good. So welcome, Amanda.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We're so thrilled that you're here. So first off, I'm going to have to read from my notes because I've read in other interviews with you that the first line of the book, "The day Ruthie went missing, the black flies seemed to be especially hungry," came to you sort of in an instant out of nowhere, and then the rest of the book followed. Can you explain that a little bit about how the idea for the book all came to be?
Yeah, sure. I actually love telling this story. So my dad and his 13 brothers and sisters and my grandparents, my dad's Mi'kmaq, and they would travel from the Annapolis Valley, Nova Scotia every summer in the 60s and 70s to Maine to pick blueberries. So when I started writing, my dad
did that. Your dad actually picked blueberry. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yep. They all went down. They load on the back of the truck. A lot of the little details from the berry picking, not the whole story, but the berry picking is taken from my dad, because when I started writing, he was like, "You should write about us berry pickers." It's like, "No, Dad, I write fiction." But he was very adamant. So him and I went on a father-daughter road trip to Maine, which is only 6 hours away, so it's not that bad. But we went down there and he showed me the berry fields. We went down for 3 days. He showed me the berry fields. He told me a bunch of stories. And I asked him, I was like, "Were we getting eaten by black flies? Like while we were out there wandering around?" Because the first line there came to me and I was like, "Oh, maybe my dad's right. Maybe there's a story here."
That's amazing. Okay. So that line kind of came to you, and then with your dad's encouragement, I imagine then the rest of the book sort of followed. Because because a lot of people are asking you, how did you ever come up with the idea for this?
Yeah, it's funny because I spent 2 years on the first chapter, because for a long time I didn't think it was going to be a novel. I was like, "Oh, here's a little story I'll write, make my dad happy." But then I kept taking it to workshop and they would be like, "This is a novel. You have to write a novel." And then it just started, I don't know, in that magical place where stories come from, I was granted this story.
That's amazing. So a lot of the book club members, I asked them what they wanted me to ask you. And so many of them wanted to know, I know you're in Nova Scotia, but a lot of them wanted to know if you ever lived in Maine or traveled to Maine or, spent time in Maine.
I've never lived in Maine. My dad considers it kind of a second home because he spent his summers down there when he was a kid. But also, I'm from Glooscap First Nation, which is an Indigenous community here in Canada. You guys would say reservation Indians down there. And we have members in Maine, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire, and a few in Vermont who have been down there because of the berry picking. So we like to go down. My chief and counsel would go down to visit, and I would sometimes go with them because I was the administrator at the reservation, and we would go down and meet our members down there. So that was my first experience going to Maine, and now I go there quite a bit. And my dad and I actually went down to Portland for my American launch in November, and we did the same route, just the two of us. So 4 years apart, before the book was a thing, and then after it come out. So it's kind of nice.
Well, I have to ask, what does your dad think about the success of your book? He must be thrilled.
He is. He's very happy. And it's kind of funny because in Portland, when we went down, I did the whole thing you do, the Q&A and the reading, and my dad was with me. And then everybody wanted to talk to him afterwards because they wanted to hear some of the real stories. So I liked having him there with me. It was fun.
Does that still go on, berry picking in the summer? I'm curious.
So there are still Mi'kmaq who go down and berry pick. They usually take vacation to go down and berry pick. It's backbreaking work, but they do it because it's just something that's, I don't know if it's in the blood. I've never done it, but some of my friends have. But a lot less Mi'kmaq now and more other migrant workers. But I know Mi'kmaq who still go down to berry pick. Yep.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, so a lot of people wanted to know, how long did it take to research this book? Because it's almost like a nonfiction book in a way. I mean, it's so much truth.
There wasn't a lot of research, just my imagination. And then asking my dad for clarification on things like, so how did you pick the berries? So when in the book, when Joe, which was my grandfather's name, FYI, he was like stringing off the field, my dad told me how they used to do that. The only thing I really kind of in-depth research was And I don't know about spoilers on this one.
It's okay. I think most everybody's read this.
Okay,
There's a
so
spoiler coming up.
yeah. So when Norma miscarries or has
Mhm.
I had to research that because that's never happened to me, and I wanted to be respectful of the women it had happened to. So
Right.
I just went on the internet and I read a lot of firsthand accounts so that I could try to make that as respectful as I could. So there's a little bit of research there, and there's always little tiny bits of research, but overwhelmingly no. However, it was COVID, and I'd never been to Boston, so my friend in Boston got on Google Maps with me. We put the little street view on and she walked me around Boston so I could make it as real as I could.
Have you since been to Boston or no?
I have, yes. I did a reading at the Cambridge Public Library. So I got to go to Boston and I got to see the Boston Public Library, which was like wow, absolutely amazing. I had to go
Oh,
some good Italian food. So yeah, it was fun.
yeah, it's a great city. That's great.
Mhm.
So I was going to ask you when you mentioned Joe, how did you come up with the names for these characters? Ruthie, Norma, Joe, Aunt
A
June,
lot of
etc.
Yeah, a lot of them are just names I just came up with. But Joe was my grandfather's name, and Lewis was his father's name. So those are kind of like I don't know. It was a little homage to them. And when I was writing the characters of Cora and Leah, in my head they looked similar to what two of my high school friends looked like. So I named them after my high school friends,
How
just
fun.
randomly. Yeah, but everybody else is just it's just whatever came up.
Were your high school friends thrilled to be mentioned?
They're like, this is so weird because my friend Cora is a petite redhead, and in the book she's a
Oh,
petite redhead, and it just was how I visualized the characters when I was writing them, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna give them those names. So.
so a lot of people in the book club have mentioned that this is one of their favorite book covers of the year. And so
Mhm.
they wanted me to ask you, did you have any input into that cover? How did that cover come to be about? Because people just love the cover.
Yeah, it is absolutely beautiful. I just love it. It's so lush, and if you have the book in your hand, it's soft. The cover is really
It
soft.
is. I just love it.
I know. I asked my publisher, I was like, "What is this?" And they told me, but I don't remember. But I was just like, "This is so beautiful." I didn't really have a lot. You don't really have a lot as a writer. They send you a couple different ones saying what do you like best, and you can pick. And that's kind of what I did there. But it was just I didn't have to change anything. It was just so beautiful.
So beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. And
So,
it's people have told me they bought it because of the cover, and I was like, I've
yeah.
done that before, so hey,
No, it's gorgeous. And it carries over into the back too. It's just
yeah.
so was it hard writing, going back and forth between the voice of Norma and the voice of Joe? Did you originally plan it that way, that you were going to go back and forth between the two narratives, or did that come to you when you started writing the book that you should do it that way?
Yeah, for the first 2 years, it was only ever gonna be Joe's story. Norma wasn't even a part of it until, like, the very end. But then I got a couple chapters into Joe, and there's just, like, this nagging voice in my head saying, "I wanna tell my story, I wanna tell my story," and I was like, "Okay, maybe there's a story here." So, I did decide to write Ruthie/Norma's story, but when I started that, I realized I was having trouble getting into, like, Joe's head and then switching to Ruthie's. So
Really?
I just wrote all of Joe's kind of, and then I wrote all of Ruthie's, and then I put them together like a puzzle.
Wow, that must have been difficult.
It wasn't too difficult because I knew where it was gonna go. I think it would have been more difficult if I tried to switch between the 2 because I wanted each voice to be authentic to the character,
Yeah.
and I didn't want them to get muddled. So I was like, "Okay, I'm completely in Joe for the next 3 months," and then I put Joe away, and then I go completely to Norma and just write her. And then I kinda knew where they were gonna go, so there was a little bit of finagling. But yeah, I had to do it that way, or it wouldn't have been successful, I don't think.
So did I hear you correctly? It took you 4 years to write this book. Is that right?
Yep, 4 years, yeah. So I wrote it in 2017, I started it, and, like I said, it was 2 years, I thought it was just gonna be a short story, and
Mhm.
then when I got accepted to the MFA program at the Institute for American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico,
Oh,
and I
God.
used yeah, it was, oh, so brilliant
It's
experience, I absolutely love that
incredible.
place.
Yeah.
So it was a low residency, plus it was COVID, so we were doing everything online, but I used the chapters as my creative writing assignments. So I used chapter 1, 2, 3, 4. So that half of the book was written with the help of my classmates and my remarkable mentors at IAIA. And then the last half was just me in a mad rush to get it done.
So did you, but so what's your writing process like? I mean, did you did you know how this would end when you started it, or did you have a good outline? I'm always curious as to how writers plot out their books, or if you just start it and then it changes as you go, or what exactly?
Yes. So I did know how I wanted it to end. I knew how I wanted it to end.
You did.
But
Okay.
the middle, I had an outline, but I tend to make really detailed outlines and then I don't tend to follow them. I just let the creative gods take me where they will. So I did have an outline, but I did veer significantly. Like I said, the whole first outline was just Joe. There was no Norma, and it was a very detailed outline. And then I was like, well, I have to make a new outline. So yeah, I do outline, but I very rarely actually stick to the outline.
So was it going to be just Joe looking back at his life and talking about Ruthie, and then, but
yeah. And can you imagine how boring that would have been?
So I don't know. No, I think it was great that it went back and forth the way it did.
Yeah, and I'm glad that came to me, that to put her in there. And I have read some reviews for like, what's the purpose of Joe's story? Like, he doesn't even belong in this story. And I was like, oh, that breaks my heart, because it's his story. Like, it's his sister and his love for his family, which leads to really bad consequences sometimes. But I was like, it can't be a story without Joe.
So you read your reviews, huh?
I read Goodreads.
Okay.
I think it's great.
Sure.
I was like, oh, well, everybody has different writing or reading tastes, right? My sister reads romance novels, and I'm like, I can't really read romance novels. They don't interest me a lot. And she hates the novels I read. She's like, they're so depressing. Why do you read all that? But we both read voraciously, right? So as long as people are reading and enjoying what they're reading, hey,
nothing else. Yeah. So was there a particular scene or character or passage of dialogue or chapter that was really challenging to write?
I think the Norma scene where she loses the baby was really, really challenging, just because, like I said, I've never experienced that, and I didn't want to re-traumatize anybody reading it who had experienced that, and I wanted to be truthful to those who had. So that's why I read a lot of firsthand experiences. So that was kind of hard. And when Charlie died, I cried writing that one. I'm like, why does he have to die? Questioning myself. But yeah, there were some hard parts to it. But I always came back to the fact that there's a lot of joy and love in that book. Right. Even though there is this overwhelming sadness sometimes, there is a lot of joy, there's a lot of love, and there's a lot of family in it. So,
do you find it hard to write dialogue, or did that come pretty easily?
I don't. I actually find dialogue not so difficult for some reason. Yeah. I've been told that my prose is sparse and simple, and I'm like, that's okay. And my dialogue is spot on. So I'm like, I'll take it. I'll take it.
Did your dad read the book before you put it out to the publisher?
No, he read it after it came out, and it's the only book he's ever read, because my dad is like, yeah, he's like a hands-on guy. He was out of high school working, and he's worked his whole life, and he's very successful, but not with like academic kind of ways. So it's the first full book he's ever read, and he sat with my stepmom and they read it together, and yeah, it was great. He's like, yeah, I read your book and I loved it, and of course he could spot little things, right, that he had told me. He's like, oh, I remember when I told you that. And it's like, yeah.
So did you learn anything when writing or researching this book about your dad, or about anything? I mean, did you learn something that's kind of surprised you when you were doing this book?
I don't know if it's surprising. Like, I knew that they had been berry pickers, but you know, when your dad tells you stories when you're little, it's like you don't pay that much attention, right? But it's such a rich history that a lot of people don't know about. And as soon as the book came out, I had other Mi'kmaq people and Mi'kmaq friends coming to me and saying, I have my stories from the berry fields. I have stories from the berry fields. I have stories from the berry fields. And I get emails. I got an email from a elderly woman in Maine yesterday, actually, saying she loved the book, and she sent me a picture of two Mi'kmaq baskets that she had purchased back in like the 30s from Mi'kmaq basket makers working the berry fields. So I was like, this is so amazing that there's that connection and people are feeling that. So yeah, I really love that.
Oh, that's incredible. So just tell us a little bit about your background. Did you always want to be a writer? Did you, since you were a little girl? I mean, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I did. And my grandma on my mom's side, my grandma Lightfoot, she used to tell me, she's like, you used to make these little books for your grandfather. And my grandfather died in 1992. So it's like I was 14. It's a little hazy for me. But about 3 weeks ago, I was in the basement. And I found one of the little books I made my grandpa when I was like 5 years old.
Wow.
I made this book of happy faces for Grampy. So that's really sweet. But yeah, I've always wanted to write, but being a mixed race, small rural town on the welfare system, I was always encouraged to do something that would be lucrative. So I went to school, I went to university, I got all the master's degrees.
Right.
I made the right decisions. And then in 2012, I got to a place where I was like, now I can do it. Now I'm going to really dive in and make this something I want to do. Never did I imagine that a book would be published. I just wanted to write.
Right.
So I started taking courses at the University of Toronto online, and I loved it so much. I did the entire certificate, and then I got into IAIA, and yeah, the rest is history.
So when you were pursuing your lucrative career, were you always writing them on the side, like as a side
Yeah.
project?
Yeah, I had little things. So I have like short stories. I have one short story that I wrote when I was 21, and I still can't get it right. I'm just like, it's not coming together. And I don't know if it's like this one. It's supposed to be a novel, but someday I might get around to it. But yeah, I used to write, and I lived in Asia for a while and Europe for a while, and I would write stories while I was there and record things. So yeah.
So what's your writing space like? Do you have to write like in a certain room, or when it's totally quiet, or do you write a certain day of the week? That's when you get most of your writing done. What is all that like for
Well,
you?
since I started teaching, I haven't written at all, but because there's a lot to teaching that it doesn't let me do that. But
Well,
I
also
do.
tell everybody. So you're teaching right now. So tell her you're teaching what?
Yeah, I teach creative writing and English at Acadia University here in the Annapolis Valley as an associate professor. So I just started that in July. So since then, I haven't really got a lot of time because I'm just creating my courses, right? So
Right.
next year I'll have a lot more time because the courses have been created and I'm just teaching them. But right now I'm so excited about teaching. Like I'm particularly interested in teaching them women of color and Indigenous literature. So I'm really excited about that. But I do have an office here in my house, but I don't use it. And it just tends to like, now it's kind of like the room where everything goes, that room where you just put everything.
We all
And
have
then
that room. That's pretty much the
it goes.
right.
So I'll just write on my couch sometimes. I do have my office at work, which in the summer is dead quiet because all the students are gone. It's a small liberal arts university. So I do like to go there, and I really like to get out. So this weekend is my birthday, so I've rented a cottage on the ocean.
Birthday.
Thank you. I've rented a cottage on the ocean for 4 days with a hot tub. So I can sit in the hot tub and look at the ocean and then go inside with big windows and write. So that's my plan, just to give myself these little sections of time to really dig in.
So when you wrote this book, did you have so I guess you finished the whole thing and then found an agent and a publisher, or did you write part of it and find an agent and a publisher?
I found an agent based on a short story I wrote called Waiting for the Long Night Moon, which is also the title of my short fiction collection that comes out in August in Canada and January in the US. So she signed me based on that. It did win the Indigenous Voices Award from Published Prose up here in Canada. So she signed me based on that. And then she waited 2 years for the Berry Pickers because I told her I wanted it to be something I was proud of. And I wasn't going to just put a book out into the world to be a book out in the world. I really wanted it to be something I was proud of. So she waited, and I sent her the first 7 chapters, and she sold it to HarperCollins in Canada based on the first 7 chapters.
That's pretty amazing because usually I've heard that when you write fiction, you have to write the whole thing.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. But yeah, HarperCollins bought it, and then they gave me 3 months to write the last 8 chapters. So that was fun.
Yeah. So during those last 3 months, you must have had a schedule then to
a very detailed schedule.
And
you had to actually where I worked at the time, the First Nations Financial Management Board here in Canada, they actually let me take Fridays off so that I could Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, basically 12-hour days of just writing. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you about Aunt June and if you had a special aunt that you were close to, because she was such an important character in this book and I really loved her and I loved their relationship. So did you have an aunt that you're close to, or did you in the past, or?
Oh, I have so many aunts. It's crazy. Like so many. My dad, like I said, is one of 14.
Right? 14.
I have 7 aunties on that side.
Oh
and I had two or three on my mom's side. So four aunties on my mom's side. So I've been surrounded by aunties my whole life. But I think what I got from it is that I have nieces and nephews, 4 of them, and 1 on the way, a baby girl in May.
Oh, great.
And I kind of think my superpower is auntie. So that's the kind of auntie I would have wanted to be, right? Is someone who's there. And I am that someone who's there, right? My sister lives across the road with the 4 kids, and they can come over here if they get tired of their mom, stuff like that.
Oh,
So
that's really sweet. She lives
yeah,
across the street from you? That's great.
yeah, my sister lives across the road from me with the 4 kiddos. So I just really love that. Like I went out to grab my flyers, the paper flyers at the end of the driveway this evening, and I hear, "Hi, Auntie." And it's my 9-year-old nephew playing soccer in the backyard, and he's waving to me.
I thought it was so poignant, just Aunt June, what she was going through at the very end, like so torn. Should I have told you earlier? What should I have done? And I thought that was really well written and just well thought out.
Yeah, thank you. I have had some people say that they hate Aunt June, and I was like, oh,
No,
that hurts my heart. I was like, they're like, but she knew she could have done something. I was like, she was in a hard place. She loved her sister.
right, exactly.
What I wouldn't do for my sisters, I don't know.
Right. So I have to ask you, and everybody wants me to ask you, what are some of your favorite, who are some of your favorite authors or books or that we could check out? Any recommendations for the book club that you want us to? No, it's a loaded question. I'm sorry.
It's such a loaded question. One of my favorite writers is a Canadian writer called Jane Urquhart, and her book, The Underpainter, is probably one of my favorite books of all time. I say that, but also Anne of Green Gables. I'm from Nova Scotia. I gotta have Anne. So Anne of Green Gables. Jamie Figueroa, her brother, sister, mother explorer, and she just came out with a new one today. Oh my goodness, Kelly Jo Ford, Crooked Hallelujah, is really brilliant. Oh, the Carol Shields shortlist from last year, so good. Brown Girls and When We Were Sisters just blew my mind. Absolutely blew my mind. Yeah, there's just so many. It's so hard, right? Because I have Wandering Stars now. I'm currently reading Tommy Orange's new one, so I'm pretty excited about that.
I haven't read that. Is it good?
It just came out. So his first book, There. I read a lot of Indigenous literature. So his first book, There, is absolutely brilliant. So this is his new one, just came out last week. This is just a cover because the book is on my bedstand. But yeah, there's just so many brilliant writers. I can't even think. Louise Erdrich in the U.S. and I love Ann Patchett and and I'm still like a Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and I get to go to California this summer, so I'm rereading my Steinbecks right now because I love John Steinbeck.
Why are you going to California this summer? Part of the tour or what?
No, I actually was awarded the Andrew Carnegie Medal of Excellence.
Oh wow, I did not know that.
Association, yeah. So I have to go pick up my medal, I think. So yeah. I'm heading to San Diego, and then I'm bringing my best friend with me, and we are doing a whole California little trip for 2 weeks.
Oh my gosh, San Diego is my favorite place in California, so that's fabulous. You're gonna have a great time. So I've asked you, I think, let me see, what else do I, 2 more things. So what are you working on now? I don't think you can say from what I've
well, I have my short story collection coming out. So that went to Copy Edit, and that's going to Typeset now. So that is like out of my hands now. It's coming out into the world. And I wrote a lot of those before I wrote The Berry Pickers.
And that won't come out in the States, though, till January.
Yeah, it's a while in January. Canada in August. But I am working on a new novel, and I don't talk about that because I'm afraid that the ideas will just disappear, which has happened to me a couple of times. So I like to keep it close to my heart until it's like solid. And I did write a screenplay for The Berry Pickers. And that's out in the world, but that's all I know about that right now. So it's just out in the world to see what will happen. So,
because as I said, I think this would make an amazing, TV series, even more so than a movie in my mind, actually.
Yeah, so. People have told me they can see it on the screen. So my agent said that, and I said, well, there's 2 conditions: the writer has to be Indigenous, and the actors who are Indigenous have to be played by Indigenous actors. And I kind of shot myself in the foot because then my agent was like, well, you write the screenplay. So I spent all last year researching how to write a screenplay. And then
that was very difficult for you. Was that difficult?
It's very difficult. And when you say that you hate the fact that the movie is not as good as the book, which I've said a million times in my life, and now I'm apologizing to the screenwriting world because they're completely 2 different mediums, right? It's so hard. So yeah, it was a learning experience for sure.
Right. So before I ask the final question, I asked about your dad, but I mean, I'm guessing that your friends, your other family members, that everybody's kind of blown away by the success that you've had with this book. I mean, how has it been for you to be like a recognized, celebrated writer after working on this for 4 years?
Well, it's bizarre. I'm going to be 47 on Monday, so this is all so new, right? Like, and I'm 47, so it's just exciting, and I love the way they support me. So, for example, right now in Canada, HarperCollins Canada has this thing called March Madness, where
Right.
where books compete against each other, and I'm in the competition. I made it to round 4, and I have my whole family and all my friends are like on there voting every hour, and they're like clicking the links, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I feel so blessed to have them all there for me and doing this. And they're just, I think mostly they're proud of me, and I'm really happy. I'm really happy, but I'm happy that the Mi'kmaq also are being representative there, because I get a lot of people from the States emails that I didn't even know there were Mi'kmaq. I didn't know that was a tribe.
I didn't before I read this book. Yeah.
We're still here.
And you said when we chatted before this interview aired, went live, that there's people still berry picking in the summers, right? In Maine.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah. There's still Mi'kmaq. I think a lot of the like, I live in the Annapolis Valley, which is also a farming area. We have lots of farms and vineyards. So we have lots of vineyards here. And a lot of our migrant workers are Jamaican, but I think in Maine, a lot of them are now Mexican, but there still are Mi'kmaq who go down to pick berries, because it's something like, even before like the border and everything existed, the Mi'kmaq still went to pick berries. Like, it was just a thing we do. That's why I have so many family members down in the eastern US, is because of that migratory nature, because some of them stayed there. They married and they stayed, and yeah.
And you said you've never picked berries before.
I'm too lazy for that. No, it's hard work. It's hard work. I like to read a book, and I like to write a book, sit by the fire and talk to you.
So my final question, which I always ask every author, is that The Girlfriend is all about female friendship. So when you're not reading or writing, what do you like to do with your best friends?
Okay, so my best friend in the world, her name is Shannon, and I'm taking her to California with me for 2 weeks. We've been best friends since we were 12, and we almost failed math together. So that's how we had to go in for extra help together. And she's my BFF forever. But I'm also very, very close to my sisters. Like I said, one sister lives across the road. 2 of them don't live near, but yeah, I'm really close to them. And I'm very fortunate to have girlfriends all around the world. Like I said, with the HarperCollins competition, I have my friends in Germany and Singapore voting for me. I was like, guys, you don't have to do that. Yeah, and I just feel very lucky to have I have friends that I call soul sister and sister friend and BFF. So yeah, I'm very lucky, and to have my sisters so close to me as well is really, really lovely.
How many sisters do you have?
I have 3 sisters and 1 brother.
3 sisters and 1 brother. Okay.
Yeah, and my brother's married to an absolutely lovely girl who I introduced to him. And
she's like a sister, right?
Yeah. She's brilliant, and they're having a baby in May, so I'm really excited.
Oh, that's
a little girl. So
that's great. So Amanda Peters, thank you so much. Again, the book for this month is The Berry Pickers. I think everybody in the book club has read it, but if you haven't, please buy a copy or recommend it to your friends. It's a fabulous read. And thank you so much for joining us. Everybody that's watching, please stay on the Girlfriend Book Club page, because I'm going to be posting conversation starters so that you guys can talk about the book amongst yourselves. So again, thank you, Amanda, for joining us tonight. I really, really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. Walalio.